Following the failure of yesterday's build, I wanted to try something a little simpler, but I didn't want to go straight back to the basics of no epoxy mods. I just wanted to try doing something creative that also involved a little bit of not knowing what the hell I was doing. I'm pretty good at that. I took a cube over to my bandsaw and I started cutting off 4 edges on the top of the puzzle. I didn't really know what I was doing here, I just wanted to cut them off and see what happened. Alright, so in keeping with tradition about not knowing what the hell I'm doing, I kind of like what's going on here. I think if I extend this centerpiece out, I'll have a pretty cool little triangle. What I want to do now is I want to try doing the exact same thing on the other side, and I just want to see what that looks like. Alright, so that's the perfect amount of confusing for me. I like the shape that I've got going on here. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the top and the bottom, and normally I would extend the sides as well, and that would end up with a pretty interesting looking shape, but I actually think I'm going to leave the sides flat because I think that it would look cooler if it was just kind of pointy up top and below and still have that square cross section on this axis. So I think that's going to look kind of cool. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over to my desk, I'm going to clean up all the pieces, and I'm going to fill them all with epoxy sculpt. I used a blade to cut all of the flashing off the inside of each of the pieces, although I didn't need to disassemble the puzzle to fill each of the pieces because all of the cavities were accessible to me while the puzzle was still assembled. So I filled all the pieces with epoxy sculpt, and after everything was done, I took the puzzle over to my belt sander so I could sand down each of the faces. Although the shape was a little uneven, it wasn't that hard to sand the puzzle down into its final dimension. The reason for that being is that I really just treated the edges as regular Fisher Cube edges, and everything else ended up falling perfectly into place. It's easy to get distracted when you have pieces hanging off one side and not the other, but if you just focus on the dimension of the cuts, you end up getting a perfect shape almost all the time. Now that I had the final shape of the puzzle done, there was nothing left to do but to round over all the edges of each of the pieces, so I disassembled the puzzle and I got a nail file out to knock off all of the sharp edges. After I'd knocked off all of the sharp edges, I used a sanding block and then some Scotch-Brite to finish up each of the pieces, which I was really happy with. And after the puzzle was reassembled, this is what it looks like. Oh, bugger. I really like the shape of this puzzle, although I do think that if I had extended that band around the center, I would have ended up with a pretty interesting octahedron shape, and that's what I'm going to try and build tomorrow. So instead of stickering this puzzle up here, I'm just going to call this build done since the build part of it is complete, and tomorrow I'm going to extend that band in the center, and I'm going to turn this into an octahedron. But anyways, I hope you guys liked this build. This was just a quick one, and it was a pretty simple one too. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.